Welcome to Dark Days Presents Darkhammer, a Worlds of Warhammer podcast. I'm one of your regular hosts, Chris, and I'm joined once again by Mike. Hi, Mike. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. We're really excited for this episode. Finally got to the fourth Chaos God, and it's been quite a journey. Quite a journey getting through all these. And I'm hoping we can do that fifth episode, Chris. I keep saying we should do it. So we'll see
we
what
will
happens.
do the other gods, minor things that have been spoken about in lore here, there, and everywhere, and we'll mostly talk about Be'lakor in relation to that as well.
Totally.
He's such, and then we've also got that new guy. What was it? Vashtor, the Arcathane, which is kind of a weird techno chaos god.
Yeah. He's from the Demon Forges in the Realms of Chaos. So that's more for 40k. I don't think he's going to be making any appearance into Age of Sigmar, but maybe you could do
there might be some equivalent turn up at some point. You never know. Anyway, so yeah, we're talking about Slaanesh in this episode. This is one we've been holding off on because it requires a big sucking of air through teeth as you dive into the nuances of this Chaos God. But before we get into looking at Slaanesh, we'll talk about game updates and some gaming news. Okay, so Mike, any wargaming, miniatures, hobby going on right now?
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Coming up this weekend, I'm going to be playing Warhammer 40,000 3rd Edition.
Wow.
Chaos Space Marines versus Imperial Guard. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be epic. It's going to be a lot faster than 9th Edition. So I'm pretty amped for it.
Are you playing with the Codex, or are you playing like pure 3rd Edition when it first came out?
Going to be using the army lists from the rulebook. The very bare bones simple ones. Yeah. Because my friend actually hasn't played Warhammer before. And 9th has very simple rules, but the stratagems and all the extra stuff really just makes it very complicated. And that's actually something. Yeah, it's something that happens with a lot of the Warhammer games. Is when they have one of those edition resets, they have these like kind of simplified army lists that come out with them, and when that happens, that's actually one of the best times to play.
Yeah,
it happened with Warhammer Fantasy 6th Edition, happened with 8th Edition 40k, and 3rd Edition 40k as well. It's a really streamlined way to play, so you know what the units do. There's no surprises really, and you can just get a game in. Instead of 3 hours, it's going to take you 1 hour. So I think that's going to be a great way to introduce someone to the game who doesn't really have any preconceived notions about what edition you should be playing.
Yeah. From my end, I have I've got a ton of miniatures to paint. Like seriously, I look around and I've got primed, ready to paint. So I've got the Drakari from Soul Shackle, who I'm going to do in a yellow paint scheme with contrast paints to do the hard work. So they'll be very kind of wasp-like, I think is the look. Because I found an example online, and I was like, that looks different and different to everything else I've painted. I've got the Arbites to paint, so they're all primed up, zenithal primed. So I think they just need to be hit with like a good amount of a black contrast to tone them down, but then they're pre-shaded, so that's all good. I've also got the what are they called? Are they infiltrators? Primaris infiltrators. So they're wearing the Phobos armor. I think it's Phobos armor.
Yeah. I think it's the new ones that are like the light scouts or light.
So I've got
Marines.
10 of I've got 10 of those to paint because they're the ones that came in whichever boxed game for 40k, and they're pretty much what you get in the Morok box game for Kill Team. So at some point, I'm trying to get into the point where I will actually play Kill Team. Because that's another way to get your 40k kicks without having 50 models on the board to worry about.
Totally.
And then finally, I've got on the shelf put together, needing priming, is a Delac gang with the Delac elites, the Sygeists and the Biscine Spectre, which is that weird kind of squid-like thingy-mabob. They're really fun miniatures, actually, the Delac. So I've had a lot of fun putting them together. And so I've got a paint scheme for that. It's just going to be kind of more of a unlike my Van Saar that are quite a bright red, I'm going for something that's a bit more reddish purple. So much more dark in color.
Yeah, kind of a magenta.
Yeah. And then obviously that's all the Necromunda stuff is related to the fact that I've been playing, running a Necromunda campaign for the last month or so. I think we've got everyone's tomorrow we're going to be playing at the club, so everyone should be able to get in like their third game. I've had my third game in. It's been ups and downs and everything. Playing in forces is fun. People are terrified when you're running around with bolt guns that have good ammo rolls.
Right.
And shotguns with shredder ammo are terrifying when you're just unleashing a flamer template's worth of hits on people. That's really mental. And yeah, just a lot of fun. So we're going to get in that round of games, playing with a lot of terrain, which has been good. And then we're going to do a multiplayer game for the quarterway marker, and we're going to have kind of a bit of a zombie apocalypse. So we're going to use the it's from Book of Ruin, and the scenario is called Meat. So basically, rather than zombies, they're cannibals, and you get 3 gangers per gang on the board, randomly selected, and then the board is covered in models representing cannibalistic underhivers. And it's
Yeah,
the survival of the fittest.
that's really interesting because you could definitely use that scenario to represent the plague zombies from
Pretty
the
much, yeah.
old Outlanders book.
Yeah, so there is rules in Book of Peril for brainleaf zombies, but they're not kind of the same as plague zombies. So I thought, people that have eaten too much, of the good meat before it's been turned into corpse starch is much more funny.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, and I've glued posters onto my Zone Mortalis scenery, so it looks kind of a bit more, even more dystopian and lived in, which is cool. But yeah, that's gaming. That's wargaming. So we should really talk about the news because there's quite a few cool things coming up.
Totally.
Right. Okay. So we've seen more art for the Ulfenkhan book, which is coming out soon from Cubicle 7. So that's basically a setting campaign book for Age of Sigmar Soulbound, looking at the city of Ulfenkhan, which is the focus of the Curse City Warhammer Quest game. The art is looking great. I mean, it's some of the art that's now come out for it. You're just like, this is Warhammer's Ravenloft. This is Age of Sigmar Ravenloft kind of happening, which is great. So really excited for that. On the Wrath and Glory front, we've already had like Threat Assessment Xenos out, which I worked on. There's a few other books still to come out yet, which is the Vow of Absolution book, which is the Absolvers book, the Inheritance of Embers, which is the Eldari Players book, and Vow of Absolution is a Space Marine Players book with a focus on the Absolvers chapter. And then we already know there is a threat assessment like Heretics Chaos book coming out, which we don't know much about yet, what's going to be exactly the content of that. So that's exciting. We've also had Imperium Maledictum, which I'm starting to read through, which is interesting because that's our percentile Dark Heresy kind of RPG for that takes Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition and kind of is an evolution of that. So you can play as tax collectors or whatever the heck you want to do. You're very low level. That's going to be fun.
I love it.
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, there's Ubersreich Adventures 2 coming out, or is out, I can't remember, but that's more small scenarios compared to the Enemy Within campaign. There's also the Lustria book is out. That's quite interesting. So that means you can head off to Skeggy or the Vampire Coast and into the dense jungles of Lustria and contract various horrible plagues and diseases that are there, because obviously Skaven are there as well. I think there's also a little bit of text in there about the temples that are on the southern tip of the Southlands, so Southlands, Khemri region.
Oh,
So that's
really?
interesting.
Yeah, that's very spicy. I'm going to check out that book. I'm very curious how they treat the if they even have the colonies in there, because that was something I never really enjoyed about Lustria in Warhammer Fantasies when they started putting the human colonies over there. It
Yeah,
seems like it's one of those things that just follows human history too much, and I felt was a little lacking. I don't mind the Vampire Coast though, because that's just Pirates of the Caribbean Warhammer
yeah,
Fantasy Edition.
exactly. And then of course, Warhammer Fantasy Old World. We're getting more teasers on that, and essentially, you know, base sizes are 25 millimeter standard for everything, unless obviously
Yeah,
they're cavalry or big monsters and so forth, which means essentially they're acknowledging that even the smaller models had a problem ranking up, and this kind of solves that, standardizes some things. It also should mean, given that, like, I think a lot of Age of Sigmar stuff is a 25 millimeter round base, so there are certain miniature lines which translate back into old world quite happily. Looking at like vampires, Soul Blight is fine. There'll be certainly certain things from the Auric range. There'll be certainly various things from the Ogre Kingdoms range, because that basically is still fantasy range. Um, and of course, everything we still have as a holdover, which form the cities of Sigmar. There's still going to be plenty of miniatures in that range, which translate back over to Old World.
yep.
Whether it's Corsairs or what is it? Whatever Wood Elves were called now, and all those things. So it means they can get off to quite a good start with some repackaging or just selling bases, and then then fill in the gaps and update the miniatures. Which, again, if you place it as a Sigmar, like if you've got a dwarf army for Warhammer, again, it's how much work you want to put in. So that's gonna be good. 40k 10th edition, God, teasers, it's looking good. So far they are
Yep.
condensing things down onto one page, which is feels very Age of Sigmar. But I'm hoping they also limit how many they're meant to be saying. They're limiting the amount of stratagems and so forth that you have to pick from, so it becomes more obvious, meaningful choices rather than
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, ninth edition has a bit of as I understand it, because I haven't played it, but it has that kind of like combo building that you see in, say, like a collectible card game, that sort of thing, where you kind of you shock your opponent by being like, haha, I'm going to do these things. And then they didn't see it coming that those little Gretchen actually just took out that dreadnought. That's an extreme case, but stuff like that I think they're going to avoid, and make it such that it's more tactical decisions on the battlefield that matter, as opposed to um, how to game the rule system,
Yeah,
which I appreciate.
yeah, it'll be good because it just to feel like you've lost the game before you even got to the battlefield because of whatever crazy combo of things is a bad feeling.
Right.
And also, like, there's the way they've now split the ballistic skill for your roll to hit on weapons away from the base profile allows for a bit more variety, and I guess opens up options on design for them, which is good. I mean, that's what Age of Sigmar does. If you look at a weapon on a fighter, if they've got two weapons, they might have two separate rolls to hit because of how unwieldy one weapon is versus the other. And
Yep.
then lastly, Bolt Gun, which is a Doom retroclone game, is out. That's been voice acted by Rahul Kohli, who is in Midnight Mass, and I'm trying to think of the series. Haunting on Hill House, Blythe Manor. So he's in that. So he's a massive 40k wargaming fan on social media. So Bolt Gun. If you want to play Doom, but you're a space marine, go play it.
The game people have been wanting for 30 years. It's finally
Yeah,
here.
pretty much, isn't it? Yeah. And then that's all I can think of interesting kind of announcements. Obviously, we're at the end of Arcs of Omen, so there's a lot of stuff online about how that's being wrapped up. Because of course, Lionel Johnson is back. Commander Dante is now a Primaris Marine, all those kind of big changes. It's, I don't know, at least 40k feels like it's moving forward plot wise. They have some ideas. Like it's still
Yep.
the end of the world is end of the universe, well, end of the galaxy is coming, but at least it moves forward.
Yeah, I'm hoping they do something with the Lion and Rabute Gilliman, because it seems like there should really be some tension between them.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, Rabute is kind of the younger brother, but he's taking control of everything, whereas the Lion has, you know, his own methodology for doing things. You know, he wasn't around when this whole Codex Astartes was created, so how's he going to feel about that? Probably not that strongly about it.
yeah.
So I think they should really leverage that. And it doesn't sound like the Arcs of Omen, the Line, did much with it. It really just had the Line kind of just show up again and then kind of leaves it open for the future.
Yeah, from what I've read, he basically shows up, lays the smackdown on Angron, and yeah, it's one of those things of where does either side really kind of win? They win some things but lose other things, so it'll be interesting, and we'll get into that when we for the one after this, because we're going to talk about other kind of powerful near godlike entities in
Yep.
the Chaos Pantheon. And I think that fits into it quite well. And that leads us quite well into, let's talk about Slaanesh. Whew. Do you want to start,
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm ready for this. Okay, before we get to Slaanesh himself, let's just talk about all the Chaos Gods in general. We've had several episodes on this, but this time we've kind of rewritten the introduction a little bit, just to talk about things in general. So the Chaos Gods exist in all three of the Warhammer settings, and they're pretty much the primary antagonists of the settings themselves. The Chaos Gods are primarily represented by four demonic deities in constant struggle between themselves and with the mortal world. The great game between these entities exists on many levels. You have these armies of demons clashing in the realms of chaos. You've got cult like gangs shanking and stealing from each other in the shadows of Hammerhall. Perhaps you have puppeteers putting on sadistic shows and trying to one up each other in the hidden salons of Nuln. Or even you could have munitorium workers handing out unsanctioned political tracts on one of the hive worlds. You know, we've talked about on previous episodes Khorne, the blood god, the pestilent deity Nurgle, the scheming magician Tzeentch. And today we're going to cover the dark prince of pleasure, pain, excess, and perfection, the hedonist known as Slaanesh. Now, Slaanesh is very interesting because this chaos god actually differs the most in each of the three Warhammer settings. While Khorne is out butchering and maiming and raiding, and Nurgle is always concocting his little secret disease sauce in these three settings, Slaanesh has kind of had the most meta plot of the big four chaos gods. Chris, you want to take it away and just kind of give us all an introduction about Slaanesh themselves?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what is Slaanesh really about? Because that's what we're going to dive into. So, if Khorne is about destroying things and bloodshed and kind of rage unleashed, and we know that Nurgle represents our fear of death and decay and disease and the world consuming us, and Tzeentch is a fickle thing about there is power out there that changes the world, and about can we grasp that power. And obviously that has repercussions about can we grab onto our destiny, or are we simply victims of some fate that's been laid out for us, which is opposed to that inevitability of Nurgle. The opposite then to Khorne is because Khorne is all about rage and hate and anger. Slaanesh is the opposite to that because it's about the other thing that pushes us to do things in life, which is and obviously inspires us to do things in life, which is to follow our passions. And passion is a broad term. And following passions is obviously not a negative thing, but it's when we become so obsessed and indulgent with those with those passions and what become lusts and desires, that it then consumes us, and Slaanesh is whispering to us. And then the question is, how far are we willing to go? How far are we willing to sacrifice others in order to obtain what we desire? And what we can desire can also be the desire for perfection, which is a dangerous thing because perfection can be this ambiguous thing that can never be fully grasped. So, in that sense, then Slaanesh can influence and taint and draw people from all strata of life, because there are the people at the very bottom rungs of society that desire things that have been held away from them. They want better food, they want the riches, they want opulence. And then, of course, there's people above them who are willing to stamp on those below them in order to get headway above. And then there's the people above them at the very upper echelons of power who will do anything they can do to jealously guard the things that they are obsessed with and what they indulge within. So, in that sense, there is some similarity to Tzeentch and how Tzeentch corrupts, but I guess the difference is Tzeentch corrupts because people are drawn to power. Slaanesh corrupts because people are drawn to desire. And while there are similarities in maybe how those agents might create mystery cults to do so, the end goal is obviously quite different. And the other thing we should say about Slaanesh is that the followers of Slaanesh don't also have to be limited to desires or obsessions which are purely, I would say, hedonistic and sexual in nature. It's broader than that. It can be also about it could be simply about art and beauty, and how weird that can get with those obsessions and seeking perfection or what is considered perfect. But it's also about finding new experiences. So that those new experiences could be in some obscura den, in some hive. It could be in some, some part of the mortal realms where there is some narcotic or drug or particular art that's created by horrible means that they want to collect. Or it could also be experiencing every little nuance of that you have in combat. So every little scream and pain and color and sound in it on the battlefields, you can search for every single little experience, and that is what drives followers of Slaanesh to engage in wanton destruction and combat, because they're looking for those new experiences. And as I said, experience can be positive. So, love, joy, all those things are fine. But again, the case is those are in moderation, and if people get obsessed, that's where things start to go wrong.
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting in preparation for this episode. One thing I hadn't considered was that magic can really be a desire that Slaanesh followers will pursue, and Slaanesh can actually feed off of, because in the context of Warhammer 40,000, not everyone's a psyker, not everyone's a psychic, but some that know about that could be seeking to receive that sort of a power, and that could be a gift from Slaanesh. And likewise, in Warhammer Fantasy, the two settings, not everyone's a wizard, so that of course can be something that they pursue. And clearly that's also Tzeentch's purview, but I think it's kind of, when you have that desire, that lust, and that exploration and fulfillment, I think that's really interesting to either put into Slaanesh's purview or kind of have a character who mixes the two in some ways.
And yeah, building on the idea of magics, I guess followers of Slaanesh would be definitely utilizing magics that do glamours to enthrall people, to get them into their service in order to, again, have the opportunities to explore experiences that they would not normally have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of
Yeah,
fits.
certainly.
Glamour's definitely fits Slaanesh. I mean, if we're going to talk about Slaanesh, then we can also talk about how cultists and followers of Slaanesh kind of depict Slaanesh. Slaanesh is, let's just say, is gender non-specific. Normally, is referred to both as he or she or they. They are she who thirsts or the dark prince or many other epithets which evoke what Slaanesh is about. And then physically, and this also reflects onto demons of Slaanesh and also to the followers of Slaanesh if they're blessed with particular gifts. There is no, their outward gender. They may even not even consider themselves to have a gender at that point because they have aspects from the two extremities of what we consider gender or biological sex. So it's complicated and interesting in that respect. And again, that is not to say, and I think this is quite important to say, is that again, the reason why Slaanesh and followers of Slaanesh and demons of Slaanesh have that fluidity of form is in the pursuit of dangerous levels of obsession at the cost of others. So it is not to say a character in the Warhammer setting, wherever, if they are, like, if you're going to play 40k, you are, if you want to play a transgender character, or if you feel comfortable playing that, that's what you want to explore. Maybe that relates to who you are as a person. All those things, that's fine. But again, the difference is that's about you as your character, how they perceive, but it's not at the cost and of others. And I think that's the important thing. When it becomes at the cost of others, that you are willing to sacrifice society and your fellow kin in the pursuit of your indulgences, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, thinking in a broader term, we're just trying to say that, I guess the way that Slaanesh is written, it's really just about their experiences and how they can maximize the breadth of those
Exactly.
experiences.
Yeah.
And obviously, if an individual, if a character is transgender, that doesn't mean that they're in any way worshiping Slaanesh or involved in
Exactly.
chaos. That's just just a natural thing.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Now we've got that bit out of the way, I guess we can get into the nuances of Slaanesh in the 3 settings. So, do you want to start off with Warhammer Fantasy?
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's start off with the original one. So in Warhammer Fantasy, chaos is a primeval force that was unleashed in the old world when the chaos gates, which were these interstellar travel gates constructed by the old ones, exploded. So basically, their stargates at the North Pole and the South Pole blew up. And the mysterious destruction of these gates unleashed the winds of magic and the dark tendrils of chaos upon this primitive world. At this point, Slaanesh existed with the other 3 chaos gods and instantly began to prey upon the more susceptible species of the world. So, in the woods, you had drunken beastmen fall under his sway and become the Slangors. You had gluttonous ogres in the northern wastes turn to the Dark Prince's banner. And of course, there were humans that were lured by promises of perfection or pleasure. Perhaps the most dangerous early Slaanesh cult was the Elven Cult of Pleasure. In the aftermath of the Second Great Chaos Incursion, the elves stood victorious because of the sacrifices of Anarion. They had tamed much of the Great Chaos energy with the Great Maelstrom above their island of Ulthuan. And as the elves expanded their overseas holdings in the aftermath, this set upon a great golden age for them, but a decadence fell upon the island of Ulthuan. Morathi, who was the former queen of the High Elves, the second wife of Anarion, led a cult that pervaded all aspects of society, eventually making a deal with her son Malekith to use the cult's influence to make him the new Phoenix King, basically getting his father's crown. This action between Morathi and the cult, and of course Malekith, eventually sparked a civil war amongst the elves, causing the rift that created the Dark Elves of Nagaroth. Now, the Cult of Pleasure, which was firmly devoted to Slaanesh, was officially banned in the Dark Elf cities, but by the end times of the Warhammer Fantasy setting, the Cults of Pleasure had become resurgent amongst the Dark Elves, giving Morathi a new power base. Um, that's really the main big one for Warhammer Fantasy. There's also some, one special character who's very Slaanesh focused, who is Sigvald, and he is obsessed with perfection and his own perfection, and has a fun special rule that he can occasionally roll a fail of stupidity roll and get lost in his own mirror shield, looking at his own visage, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, in Warhammer Fantasy, it's really hedonistic desires that that lead to the erosion of society as these cults, sacrifice the needs and ideals of society. I think that's really where Slaanesh kind of comes into play in Warhammer Fantasy.
So that leads us into really quite well talking about Age of Sigmar, because everything you just said about the elves is obviously the past is prologue for Age of Sigmar in a huge way. I think everything we know about the end times and and Sigmar and how that feeds into Age of Sigmar is one thing, but I guess of all of the factions, the elves of Age of Sigmar are the ones that are where all of that ancient history of Warhammer Fantasy has perhaps the greatest impact of all. So obviously, there was the end times, and the world that was destroyed, and the cursed gods, consumed everything. Thought they'd won, and Slaanesh goes on. Slaanesh basically does a in the Warhammer setting. Does exactly what Slaanesh did in the 40k setting, which is going, oh, elves, they obviously have they have heightened passions. I like that. I'm going to consume their souls. And so feasts upon all of the dead elves and goes after elven gods, eats all of them, and becomes this bloated, gluttonous chaos god of desire and lust and obsession. Now, of course, the mortal realms take form, and the chaos gods are like, yes, we want to consume the souls that are being born within that realm and taint it and control it. And again, this is where the elves come in. So we have certain elven heroes from the end times who are essentially reborn as gods or demigods. We have Teclis, we have Tyrion, who is now still Tyrion, who hasn't yet turned up in the game. Teclis has through the Lumineth Realm Lords, who are from the realm of light. And then in the realm of shadow, we already know Malarian, which is the name of Malekith. So Malekith retakes his original name and is somewhere in the realm of shadow. And we also have Malarian's mother, who is a former high priestess of Slaanesh, in effect, Morathi, is also reborn into the mortal realms and is essentially a demigod. And they all together work to trap between using mystical chains. They trap between the realm of light and the realm of shadow the god Slaanesh. So Slaanesh is in chains, hidden due to the gloaming that occurs between those two realms. So it's kind of misty shades. It's also an interesting part of the world because I believe in that area or near there is also the kind of sub-realm of Shadespire, which is just an interesting side note.
Yeah,
and with Slaanesh now in chains, this god missing, they go about. So obviously there are some elves within the immortal realms, but they're not the elves of old as these new elven gods see them. So they go about basically siphoning off from Slaanesh the souls that it consumed. So they all take a portion, they all combine together, they all take a portion of the souls. I think Marathi's a little bit sneaky and takes a bit too many. And so the result is Teclis does his first attempt to do a rebirth of the old elven race, and that gives us the Ideneth Deepkin. They have a whole problem where many of them are born without souls, and they have to harvest souls from other races to keep them alive. The follow up to and they went and fled because Teclis wanted to destroy them because he thought they were anathema, and hence why they're all living in the oceans. Then we have then we also have the Ideneth Deep, not the Ideneth, the Luminous Realm Lords, who are maybe more akin to what Teclis envisioned and Tyrion envisioned. We don't know about Malarian's elves that he's formed, and then Marathi's elves, the witch elves, the daughters of Cain, because Marathi's kind of playing this game like Cain is a god that's still alive. He ain't. He's so dead. But she has like his heart still and is kind of playing the role of the high priest of him. Yeah. Creates her witch elves plus also many other malshapen elves. So you get the Medusae and the what are the ones with wings? The kind of harpy like. I can't think. Anyway, so they're kind of shaped and even her own form as she's consumed these souls. She's now a split being and is twisted by elements of Slaanesh. So she has like a snake's body and so forth. That means Slaanesh is drained of power, but the chains are breaking, and Slaanesh was able to birth into this world the newborn, which then split into two demigods called Dekessa and Sinessa, so the Talon of Slaanesh and the Voice of Slaanesh. So, and then we've got, even on top of all that, of course, is Marathi going into, going to the Island of Deepkin and stealing some magical item, which I can't remember its name, but it's like a cauldron, and then filling that with Varanite, which is a form of realm stone, a bit like warpstone that forms in the 8 points, and uses all of that plus all the souls that are being sucked into this as her witch elves are killing a lot of people, and that allows her to consume enough souls to become essentially a god. So that is an interesting parallel of how she's chasing and eating stuff of Slaanesh.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like the image that when she's doing her blood ritual, she's basically trying to stuff Slaanesh full of followers of Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle, which is pretty fun because I don't think Slaanesh likes that. That's not a meal he really desires.
Yeah, because that was part of her plan, wasn't it? Was to sacrifice souls to Slaanesh to cause it to birth more souls out that were elven souls or something, or release release the souls of ancient elven heroes as well that she consumes. It's very we'll have to talk about Marathi again at some point because she's complicated and interesting. The fact she's a god now.
Certainly.
So that's Slaanesh in the in Age of Sigmar kind of like backstory, and there's a whole lot of the Hedonites of Slaanesh, the main armies of Slaanesh, are obviously fighting to try and find where Slaanesh is, chained to unleash their god.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm just interested to see if they do anything with those two kind of demigods, the Talon and the Voice, because I don't think they've really done that much yet. But that could be a really interesting angle to have these kind of two avatars of Slaanesh wandering around and working for or even against their creator. Could be pretty cool. Yeah, so let's talk about 40k. So in that setting, Slaanesh is the youngest chaos god, while Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Khorne were created by psychic resonance around the first millennia. Slaanesh was formed during the 30th millennia. In M30, humanity was in the midst of the Age of Strife. By comparison, the Eldar Star Empire was the greatest power in the galaxy. Its worlds were peaceful, its technology advanced and automated, so the Eldar basically didn't have to do anything. Machines served their every whim. The Eldar species lived in comfort, able to traverse the galaxy with its webway, ignoring the treacherous warp storms that were raging and affected all other species. But these warp storms were growing for a reason. As the Eldar turned from hard work and empire building to dubious pleasures, arcane tricks, and sensual excesses, the psychic imprint on the warp began to create a new being. The Eldari were soon haunted by dreams of the growing entity, and soon their worlds burned. Violence, cannibalism, and worse sparked throughout Eldar society as Slaanesh formed in an ecstatic climax of pain and pleasure. The warp storms subsided, but the Eldar Empire was no more. The region of space now filled with the warp rift called the Eye of Terror. The gods of the Eldar were nearly all slain, and the few remaining of the species clung to giant spaceships called the Craft Worlds, or to the rustic lifestyle of the Exodite Maiden Worlds. Slaanesh was born, and unfortunately, the Eldari souls would be consumed by this new chaos god. So most of the Eldari needed to use soul stones from the Eye of Terror, which they grabbed from the different crone worlds, to basically protect themselves, to protect their souls. The Drukhari, the Dark Eldar, if you will, meanwhile needed to drink the souls of others to save themselves from Slaanesh, basically offering up the souls of others to save their own. But the subsidence of these great warp storms throughout the galaxy led to the start of mankind's reunification wars and the Great Crusade itself, leading to, of course, the Horus Heresy. And it didn't take long for Slaanesh to find new worshippers to feed their lust. During the Great Crusade, Slaanesh lured the Space Marine Primarch Fulgrim. Fulgrim sought perfection, becoming an exquisite warrior, further enhanced by the demon sword Laren, I believe. The Primarch Horus was able to convince Fulgrim that the Emperor of Mankind was holding back humanity from perfection, and only the two brothers could slay their father and return mankind to a better path. This, of course, backfired, and now Fulgrim is a multi-armed snake man. Pretty perfect. So
yeah, it's a crazy creation
it's a wild
of
story.
Slaanesh. I mean, again, you can see how they've pulled that to give the parallel in Age of Sigmar with the whole consuming the passionate Eldari, elves, souls. Yeah, I think there's, and then it's very interesting. I guess there is some parallels between Marathi and her pleasure cults, and there definitely is a parallel between Marathi and her pleasure cults and the Drukhari, and there are certainly going to be cults within Komorra, and obviously that's the only way they can stave off Slaanesh. But yeah, it's fun times. There's a lot of different. 40K universe. There's a lot of different worshippers of Slaanesh, and we'll mostly get into that in a moment.
Yeah. I've got some more stuff, some more ideas for that. And yeah, actually, you know what? That's a good point. Let's jump into the worshippers, because I think that's a great way to lead off from the review of these settings. So, Slaanesh worship comes in many different forms. Warhammer 40,000 is probably the most popular, and the most famous Slaanesh worshippers are, of course, the Emperor's Children. This was Fulgrim's original legion in the Great Crusade and during the Horus Heresy, and these Space Marines turned to chaos along with their Primarch, except for a couple of them. There's this real good egg in the Horus Heresy novels called Saul Tarvitz, really awesome Space Marine, very cool, but unfortunately doesn't seem like he made it off of Istvan III. The Emperor's Children were once a legion that strived for perfection, but have now fallen to dubious pleasures and worship of Slaanesh. They indulge in combat, drugs, and pain. They've created the Noise Marines, and where once they strove to unify humanity and bask in glories of the past and hopes of the future, now the remaining legionnaires are really just selfish and individualistic. Likewise, on the Space Marine front, there's also an interesting thing, which is the Children of Torment, which are a Slaaneshi formation within the Black Legion. This is kind of similar to those rubric marines within the Black Legion that we found last time, Chris. And it's pretty intriguing that these marines are despised by the Emperor's children for bowing to a lesser war master rather than the perfection of their snake man, Fulgrim.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think they're pretty cool.
And then, obviously, cults that are within, I guess, non-marine Astartes-based factions. So we have here Black Crusade introduces the pirate princes of the Ragged Helix. So these are raiders who are trying to claw their way to the top of the outcast renegade society. But again, it's not about wealth, it's not about power, it's about freedom and experience. And I guess when you raid multiple star systems, you're going to find all manner of things to sate your pleasures and indulgences.
Yeah, they're kind of like cool chaos rogue traders.
Yeah, that's definitely the feel of them. That's pretty neat. I mean, the other one, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was in Wrath and Glory Dark Tide, which was in the Gilead sector. There's the main protagonist is a Slaanesh cult in that book. So you're dealing with Slaaneshi heretics it's something like the Cult of the Purple Mask or something like that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head, but
sounds like the Cult of the Purple Hand right there.
Yeah, so they're that's obviously, you notice that things are stolen from murder scenes are all generally like opulent pieces because the cultist devotees are in the lower hive and they're targeting people in the upper hive palaces. The governor is obviously one of these victims. I'm not going to say more because it's a worthwhile campaign to refit to revised Wrath and Glory, because this is from back when it was Ulysses Spiel, and we've played through some of this in our stream game, so it's there. What about Age of Sigmar? What have we got here?
Well, yeah. So in Age of Sigmar, there's a couple of different Slaaneshi cults related to the Hedonites of Slaanesh. So, after Slaanesh was broken up by Marathi into these separate pieces, locked away as well, the Dark Prince's worshippers kind of broke up into various cults and warbands. There's three broad classifications. The Pretenders gather followers amongst the wastelands and cities of Sigmar, using their charisma to convince these deluded followers that the Pretender should become the next god of excess. They gather armies, influence nobles, and stay hidden for the witch hunters until the time is right for them to attempt a ritual to gather some of the essence of Slaanesh, or perhaps to find some artifacts that will assist them in getting closer to the essence of the dark god. There's also the Seeker warbands, which search for wisps of their lost god. They treat with the followers of order, destruction, and death to learn, find, or steal information that will aid them and ultimately aid Slaanesh. And finally, there's the Invader warbands, which seek to simply continue Slaanesh's kind of great work, follow his teachings. And by that I mean, extravagant and violent pleasure and pain. It's kind of interesting because the remaining keepers of secrets, demons, prefer to work with these warbands, seeing them as the best way to vent their dark desires upon the mortal realms. And I really like the Invaders, actually, because it feels like it's almost like a real world religion that kind of forms from the old teachings of Slaanesh in a way, which I find a very, very interesting angle to take one of the Chaos Gods in Age of Sigmar.
Another one we can add to the list as well, which comes from Warcry, and I would say it's mostly of all the warbands in the original release that aligns closer with Slaanesh, because again, the warbands, they venerate aspects of chaos which are kind of minor aspects, so maybe a bit more specific. So we have the Splintered Fangs. The models have a lot of snake motifs. They use a lot of poisons, and they're pit fighters and kind of gladiatorials. They have a kind of Greco-Roman kind of look to them. And so if we go off their beliefs, there are Shames the cult, who are considered blessed by demonic entities with strength and cunning, and they're called the Coily Ones. They create various toxins and poisons, and they have serpent familiars, which they give to warriors, and they coat the blades with those poisons and barbs, and they also have a lot of nets and entangling kind of weapons and tridents like that, and that allows them to cut down, their enemies with ease. And again, I think that reflects back to a different kind of ideal of what combat is, because theirs is about veneration, glory, perfection, and obviously if you're fighting gladiatorial battles, that's so you can achieve wealth and status that gives you access to other things that again allow you to enhance your experiences. Now they worship apparently a god which they called Nagendra, and that apparently is a god beast that was corrupted by chaos, and comes from the jungles of Invidia. So Invidia is most probably, I'm just checking, is whereabouts is it? Does it say which realm it is? It doesn't say which realm it is. I was gonna say, isn't it surely in its realm of life? Yeah, it's Gairan. And yeah, I just think that obviously that snake element clearly has parallels with the Daughters of Cain.
Yeah, certainly, certainly, and also the kind of the Greco-Roman feel that you were mentioning is quite prevalent in the Daughters of Cain as well. So there's really a kind of a double whammy of similarities.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another warband or cult that I would point to, because you can really imagine that across the mortal realms there will obviously be gladiatorial arenas in various cities, in cities devoted to, which are nominally devoted to Sigmar, but they will be maybe even underground, off the grid kind of arenas where people are gambling and indulging, and these seem to be the type of warriors that would, worm their way into those locations to then start to pervert and corrupt officials and people of influence within those cities.
Yeah, I like it. That's really awesome. Yeah, I feel like man,
Go on.
Age of Sigmar. This is one of the places where Age of Sigmar has really shined, because it's brought in these really mythological elements, as you mentioned with the Daughters of Cain and the other Warcry factions, and gives it its own identity without, it's got echoes of Warhammer Fantasy, let's say, but it doesn't copy it, and also does its own really cool new take on Slaanesh, for example. So I think that this is like a really awesome way to make that setting differentiate itself from not only Warhammer Fantasy but also 40k as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's me on the soapbox. But
Yeah.
Warhammer Fantasy as well. I didn't really put many notes down here because I couldn't find or think of any good Slaaneshi cults in any of the source books for Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. But I do know of some that were in the novels, so we can talk about those at the very end.
Yeah, you can mention those. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there isn't. Yeah, there isn't, is there? I mean, literally just doing a very quick Google search, and there are wonderful wikis out there that compile a lot of things. I think the problem is that the cult of Slaanesh is so influenced by the cult of pleasure, and that's our main big bad of that.
Right.
That we don't really get much about any of the others. That's a real shame. I'm trying to think actually about the Enemy Within campaign, if there's anything mentioned
I don't
there,
remember one.
Doesn't...
I mean, the Purple Hand is the big antagonist in that.
Yeah,
that's devoted to a different chaos god. Not to spoil too much.
Tzeentchian.
Yeah. And there's some kind of generic, kind of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of Slaaneshi cults that I've seen mentioned, but nothing that really stands out in the role-playing books. But again, the novels, all right, you know what, I'll just skip down to the novels. Let's just do that right now. So there's two great ones which have Slaaneshi cults in them. The first is one that's called Wine of Dreams. It's a really awesome Warhammer Fantasy novel, which can inspire all three of the Warhammer settings. It's about a young wine seller who discovers a secret about his family's wine trade and goes on to explore a cloister, these underground gardens, and much, much more. It's very fantastical. And the original draft of the novel was so subtle that you barely even knew that this was Slaanesh at work. And then, of course, Black Library actually forced the author Brian Stableford to put in this big battle at the end, which had fiends of Slaanesh and demonettes, and 30 pages of battling it out with demons. So, whoops. But if you kind of ignore that or just kind of gloss over the end battle, it's a really, really incredible presentation of a Slaaneshi cult, which has an ending that really ponders family secrets and also generational trauma. So I think that's a great example right there. And another one is Zaragaz, which is this interesting novel, which is actually set in Estalia, which is a nation in the old world, which doesn't get much screen time. And there's a Slaaneshi cult, which is pretty obvious at the center of the plot. And, it's kind of almost mustache trolling in some ways. But the way the plot progresses, there's a lot of very interesting revelations about, once again, family that are kind of tangential to the cult itself. And that's really the main plot. It's not so much discovering who the bad guys are or which chaos god they worship. It's figuring out what really went on in the city that caused these individuals to turn to chaos like that. So I think that's another really awesome example of a Slaaneshi cult for Warhammer Fantasy.
Cool. Which I guess then leads us on to wrap up with role playing as followers of Slaanesh, and I think this is where everything we've said already we have to kind of like double down on pretty hard and say, check in with your players and your GM, what you want to do if you're going to play or have someone that follows Slaanesh, or even if you're going to feature followers of Slaanesh in your games, because you don't want to offend or just go into really kind of crass kind of sex, drugs, rock and roll, hell, like just pure, even just doing really schlocky kind of Hellraiser levels of perversion in your games, because clearly Slaanesh is more than that and can be very subtle, and I think that is where the real power is to have these people who seemingly are quite normal, but they have these obscure or maybe obscure dangerous because they are dangerous obsessions, dangerous kind of addictions. Those are also powerful plot points to look at and themes than just, oh look, we've got people that are obviously having a sex cult, which is just like, yeah, that happens, but it doesn't always have to be that.
Yeah, certainly not. And this is, of course, a great example of where to use an X card in your games. And yeah, as you mentioned, talk about things beforehand and use, like safety tools such as, consent form before the game, if you think it's going to go in this direction. As well, other ways to play Slaanesh are that we've been mentioning are probably a good idea as well. The one that's focused on the new experiences of magic, for example. That's a really cool way to present Slaanesh that will throw people for a loop. They'll be thinking Tzeentch the entire time, if they even think it's a chaos cult. They might just think that it's just a rogue wizard, which is a trope in and of itself. So that can be a great way of doing Slaanesh. Another thing that I've seen this go either way in 40K. Sometimes there are Slaaneshi cults that are abhorrent of body mutilation and body modification, using cybernetics that maybe like the Iron Warriors will use. But there's other Space Marine war bands that are devoted to Slaanesh and love that. So you can get that kind of body horror in with how they modify their flesh power armor and other things to enhance themselves and strive towards that perfection.
Yeah. It's that kind of it's that word of like perfection that's interesting because again that leads back to what we were saying about the splintered fang. Like you could have cults and like again kind of hunting troops and who are that again the reason why they hunt the way the reason why they hunt people is not to get rid of the rage, but it's because of the hunt, that experience, which then can lead into, I mean, it could well lead into cannibalism. I mean, that mostly fits quite well with Slaanesh,
Right.
the ultimate taboo. And that then, if you compare to what we said before with cornate cults, that could look kind of quite regal because they're hunters, but that's because it's a way of indulging in the rage and the bloodshed. They're two sides of the same coin almost, which is quite interesting. I mean, similarly, you could say that you could go down the way of like, um, is is does are certain diseases a form of getting experience and pain and that pain, pleasure, weirdness? I was just thinking of
Hmm.
Baron Harkonnen. Uh,
Yeah, that's wow. Wow, that's a spicy take right there. That is very interesting. Uh, I mean, clearly Fabius Bile has some
yeah,
expertise in such things, so that's certainly an angle you could take. Hmm.
I
Very
think that's
interesting.
the take home is that your cults for Slaanesh can be incredibly. You've got an incredibly diverse range of what experience means. It could well be, as I said, it could be art, and the art could be. It's almost kind of got that Cthulhu kind of element to it. That where it's almost impossible and quite unless you are willing to give yourself to it. And that's kind of, I think in the first, am I right in thinking? I always get a sense in the first Eisenhorn novel that the main antagonist, I can't remember his name, that has an element of a Slaaneshi cult, and that makes sense actually because there is a Slaaneshi, there is Empress Children. I mean, spoiler alerts galore. Empress Children Space Marine is in the final few encounters that Eisenhorn has to face, and it is a terrifying sight to behold.
Yeah, there's this got spoiled for me, and now it's spoiled for everyone else. There's a Slaaneshi cult that runs through all of the Eisenhorn novels and some of the Ravenor ones as well.
Yeah,
Um,
and
it
there's
has to
all,
do it has to do with the nobility, I believe.
isn't there also an encounter with like a? I think it's in the second novel. Isn't there like an encounter with a Drakari cult, and that has
Ah,
kind of elements.
whoa. That's really spicy. That's interesting. I really like
Yeah.
that. Huh. Oh, I'll need to workshop that one. That's pretty cool. How I mean, I haven't read the novel, but there must be some way that they learned about the Drukhari. I'm assuming this is a human cult of worshiping
Uh,
Drukhari.
there's that, and there is actually a Drakari present, obviously manipulating them
Yeah,
for
but
their own ends.
them therefore coming kind of lured towards Slaanesh, while the Drukhari themselves might not be, right? They kind of have an idea that they want to stay far away from
Yeah,
that dark god.
it's almost a proxy for them to
Yeah,
then do the siphoning through, which makes sense. Um, that's quite fucked up.
man.
Um, what
Dan
other?
Abnett comes
I'm
Dan
just trying
Abnett
to
comes
think.
up with some great ideas, man. That's something.
If you consider when that was written, I think obviously the Drakari was still going through kind of coalescing and emerging as what we have now. Um, I'm also thinking about Necromunda as well. Like you're going to have, you could most probably say that there are elements of Drakari, not Drakari, of Slaaneshi kind of. You could get Slaanesh worshippers or cults within, say, the maybe due to portions of House Escher and some of the nobility, the noble houses in the setting.
Certainly, yeah. The Spirers are people that
Yeah,
seek new experiences, going down into the Underhive, and well, usually hunting people, but also maybe just sampling drugs or other
yeah.
things that are down there.
Okay, let's wrap up with demons. What have we got? We
All
got
right, this will be super
demonettes, the
quick.
classic. We
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah.
demonettes.
Yeah, so they're
Uh,
androgynous humanoids with giant crab claws. And while some of the miniatures have been, sexy gals, mostly they're supposed to be kind of alluringly scary, which is how the current miniatures look. Um,
yeah.
I was actually surprised. There's not too much depth to them. I was kind of shocked with that, but they do have a unique demonette called the Mask, who was once Slaanesh's favorite dancer and handmaiden before being cast out to the mortal world. Apparently, when she was cursed to dance for all time for mortal and immortal audiences, after Slaanesh believed that the Mask had mocked them in a dance.
Hmm.
So that's kind of cool. There's also the steeds of Slaanesh. These are usually just the terrible, vicious, violent mounts of the demonettes. But an interesting image is that the herds of them in the meadows of Slaanesh's realm create this kind of beautiful, shifting tapestry as they run through the hills.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Fiends of Slaanesh are these six-limbed, clawed, insectoid, anteater-headed beasts. And they can be found frolicking through the realm of Slaanesh, happily dissecting and killing whatever they catch. So they've got that kind of curiosity. And then you've got the Keeper of Secrets, which is the greater demon of Slaanesh. Each one has a unique appearance, mirroring Slaanesh's mood when the demon was created. They tend to have 6 limbs, which is Slaanesh's favorite number, 2 legs and 4 arms typically. And they also have a sleek but goat-looking face. And they can invade the thoughts of their opponents, making them fearsome psychics, as well as magicians and warriors like the other greater demons. And they feed off the emotions of others, particularly fear, hope, and despair.
I'm gonna add in there as well that we also
There's another
have.
one.
There's the Infernal Enrapturous, who is by looks of it, is a specific kind of demonette of Slaanesh, but is if you read the profile on on Games Workshop's website, the maestros of discordance. They fill the battlefield with screams of pain and unrestrained elation. They are virtuosos among Slaanesh's infernal choir, so music. Um,
Oh,
so
is that the miniature that has the guy with his back muscles pulled out
yes,
to make a harp? Oh man,
exactly. It's
brutal.
it is a pretty cool design. I really I think it's really great. Uh, and then there's the contorted epitome, which is it's like these 2 demonettes with a mirror, and so they writhe across the battlefield like metallic tentacles, um, and essentially the mirror possesses another is a source of magic and allure. So there's that. And then I think the rest of anything else interesting is kind of mortals, because we've got you can get a unit of Slangor these days. I think it's a unit of Slangor,
Okay.
isn't it?
Do they have an actual miniature now? Because all the ones I've seen have been like custom conversions.
There's Slangor Fiend Blood, so it's a box of 3 of them, and there's also one
Okay.
in a Slaaneshi warband for Underworlds, which I've got that I need to paint up. So again, they're what you imagine they're they're beastmen, but they're not very furry. They've got crab-like claws, lots of gold and jewels and decadent armor on them, and then they've got a habit of wearing tights or latex or whatever the equivalent is. So, and that's something which I think ties back into some kind of just overall with the designs of them, is that kind of that goat element. I guess is how goats fit into decadence. I guess that ties back into very classic kind of Satan being the tempter.
Yeah, and
imagery.
satyrs as well.
Yeah,
in mythology of like
and
Greco-Roman mythology, Greek
and
mythology,
just
really.
and just looking, there's a character called Glutos Osgolian, Lord of Gluttony, and his palanquin is like, or chariot is pulled by some pretty mutated guys, but I think they're just mutants and they're not actually demons. But again, you get the idea.
Yep.
Right, that's us done. That's Slaanesh, isn't it?
I think it is. Yeah, that was quite a long episode, but really happy to do it. I think Slaanesh is definitely very intriguing, and they, as I mentioned, Age of Sigmar is doing some great stuff with the character. We were a little afraid originally, Chris, that they were going to try to get rid of Slaanesh,
Yeah.
because it was just kind of locked away and it was kind of written out of the lore. But when they came out with Broken Realms Marathi and the Hedonites of Slaanesh book as well, they really brought the deity back in a very interesting way, or very interesting representations.
Yeah. Which reminds me, actually, if people want to learn more about Marathi, they can go all the way back to our Dark Elf or Elves episode.
Oh,
We did that, so I think we covered Marathi quite well back then. So that's where you can learn about that. So I don't need to do a Marathi episode. Right. So let's wrap up. So I guess next episode of this, we will do everything else that isn't a major chaos god. So this will be things like Be'lakor. This will be the Arcaphane in 40k, because he's got quite kind of demigod kind of levels of stuff going on, and it's quite interesting. And then, of course, there are all the other old Chaos Gods, which are no longer maybe part of the main game setting. They're not part of the current lore.
yeah.
But again, you may as well go back.
Do we talk about the gods of law?
Yeah, we may as well talk about those and explain
right.
how that might be a way of doing something interesting in your games. As always, if you have any comments or opinions, you can contact us darkdaysradio@gmail.com. You can find us at Dark Days Radio on Twitter, Instagram. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us via the show links to our Discord. You can find all other episodes on www.darker-days.org or wherever you get your episodes from. And that is it for now. So thank you again, Mike, for helping me with this, because there's a lot.
No problem. Definitely happy to.
I think it's going to get easier from here on out with Darkhammer, with other topics. It'd be good to leave the Chaos Gods behind and look at some of the other factions. I think we should really start.
Yep.
It'll be Lustria and Lizardman. I think is definitely on our list somewhere, because that's intriguing.
That would be good before we cover Necrons and the War in Heaven.
Oh yeah. I don't think we've done Necrons. No, we haven't. Oh wow.
No.
Yep, Necrons. Brilliant. Well, that's us. So we'll say goodbye for now.
Take it easy.